Hello. The civil disobedience movement was a massive moment in our history. Millions of Indians coming together in the struggle for freedom. But we have to ask, was everyone fighting for the very same thing? You see, the idea of Swaraj, or self-rule, actually meant different things to different people. In this explainer, we are going to explore why some groups, especially the Dalits and many Muslims, felt that their own struggles were being overlooked in this larger call for independence.
So, here is our plan for today. We will start by looking at the unity of the movement. Then, we'll look closely at the specific struggles of the Dalit community. This will naturally lead us to the very important debate between Gandhiji and Dr. Ambedkar. After that, we will explore the concerns of the Muslim community, and finally, we'll see how all of these different voices came together to shape the idea of a free India.
All right, let's begin. The civil disobedience movement was a really powerful display of unity against the British. On the surface, it looked like everyone was together, one united front. Millions of Indians were joining processions, boycotting foreign goods, and defying colonial laws.
And the participation was incredibly diverse. People from all parts of society got involved. For example, look at the women. Thousands of them, from cities and villages, came out of their homes to join the marches and protests. For so many, serving the nation was seen as a sacred duty.
But this brings us to a very crucial question. We know everyone wanted freedom from the British, but did freedom mean the same thing to a wealthy farmer, a factory worker, a Dalit, or a Muslim leader? Well, the answer was often no.
To understand these different ideas of freedom, let's focus on one of the most marginalized groups in Indian society, the Dalits. Their struggle inside the larger freedom movement was very unique.
First, let's be clear about the term itself. From the 1930s, those who were earlier called untouchables began to call themselves Dalit. This word literally means oppressed. So using this name was itself a very powerful statement about their long history of social suffering.
You see, for the Dalit community, oppression was not just political. It was a painful part of their daily life. They were often not allowed to enter temples. They couldn't use the same public wells as the upper castes. They were kept out of schools and forced to do jobs that were considered unclean, like sweeping.
And this is the most important point to understand. For many Dalits, the call for Swaraj from the British did not address their most immediate problem, which was social discrimination. They believed that real freedom had to start with ending untouchability and giving them their dignity.
This difference in perspective led to a major debate between two of India's greatest leaders, Mahatma Gandhi and Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. Now, both wanted to end untouchability, but they had very different ideas about how to achieve it.
Dr. Ambedkar, who had faced caste discrimination his whole life, became a powerful leader for his community. He was convinced that social problems could only be solved if Dalits had political power. So, in 1930, he formed the Depressed Classes Association to fight for their political rights.
And here we come to the main point of their disagreement. Dr. Ambedkar demanded something called separate electorates. This meant that Dalits would vote only for Dalit candidates in their own elections. He felt this was the only way to make sure their voices were truly heard. Gandhiji, on the other hand, was worried. He feared this would permanently divide Hindu society and weaken the national freedom struggle.
This conflict became very serious. At the Second Round Table Conference in London, the British government actually accepted Dr. Ambedkar's demand. In response, Gandhi, who was in jail in Pune, began a fast unto death in protest. This created huge pressure on everyone to find some middle ground.
The result was the Pune Pact of 1932. This was a compromise. The agreement gave Dalits more reserved seats in government councils. However, and this is a key detail, these representatives would be elected by everyone, the general public, not through a separate Dalit-only election. While it was a compromise, many in the Dalit movement still remained cautious about the Congress-led national struggle.
Now, let's turn to another important community. During this same time, many Muslims in India also began to feel distant from the Congress-led movement, especially from the mid-1920s onwards.
There were several reasons for this growing feeling of alienation. Once the Khilafat movement ended, a period of Hindu-Muslim unity also weakened. Some Muslims felt that the Congress was becoming too closely linked with Hindu nationalist organizations. Unfortunately, clashes between the communities in some cities also deepened this mistrust. But most importantly, there was a growing fear that in a future India with a Hindu majority, Muslim culture and identity could be lost. This concern was voiced by prominent leaders.
For example, in 1930, the famous poet Sir Muhammad Iqbal, while he was president of the Muslim League, argued that Muslims were a distinct community that needed political protections. He believed that a simple majority-rule democracy would not work for the minorities in India.
Now, leaders on both sides did try to negotiate and find some common ground, but the atmosphere of suspicion and distrust kept growing. By the late 1920s, any hope for a strong alliance between the Congress and the Muslim League had faded, and the political gap between them just became wider.
So, what can we take away from all this? The story of Indian nationalism is not a single, simple story. It is a complex story with many layers and many different voices. The basic disagreement really came down to two different visions for an independent India. The Congress imagined one single nation, a universal amalgamation where all Indians would come together. The Muslim League, in contrast, argued that India was made up of distinct communal groups, and each group needed its own political rights to protect its development.
So ultimately, the movement for freedom was not one solid block. It was more like a coalition of different groups and different classes. While everyone wanted the British to leave, the reasons for wanting freedom, their expectations for the future, and their visions for a free India were often very, very different.
And this leaves us with a profound question, one that was so important during the freedom struggle and is still relevant for us today. When people have different ideas about what is just, what are their rights, and what freedom truly means, how do you build a lasting unity? Thank you for joining me.